Good day. Today I am going to speak on this fourth session, which is part of the city as experience. Important aspect which I am going to refer is the events in the city which shape our experiences, and a medium of discussion and documentation of video documentary which we will look at. Uh, to talk about events in the city, I think it's important to understand, again going back to our traditions and history, which shape these events in the city as much as the modern life of the today's contemporary city. Processions, festivals, social events and marriages, community gatherings, city level events of sports, political, recreational and commercial nature, which have shaped our experiences in the city. So that's where it becomes important that as much as we discussed in the last session the everyday life structure, it is the events of the city which also are important moments in life, which emerge from our traditions, social aspects, religious beliefs and the contemporary needs of modern life, which are political, economical, cultural and social in a certain sense. So, it is a marriage of both our old historical traditions and the contemporary life, which creates this important display of events and hence an important space where human life experiences and enjoys living in a good city in a certain sense. That is where I will begin with again the historical example, which again leads back to our traditions and history and roots, where we discuss in one of the sessions the historical aspect of constructing religious sacred spaces, which has also shaped and also they are important aspect of events in city life today. As you can see in the image, this display of that tradition and history is an important event activity. This is, I am talking about an event which is a event which brings the whole of Hindu world to this particular one space to celebrate and enjoy and perform the ritual and practices, which is the Kumbh Mela, which happens every 12 years in a sacred space next to the river, and these are the activities and images what you see. So, it is important to understand, as we looked at the everyday life, it is these powerful events which bring all people together, engage into an activity and hence important aspect of experience. It is telling us constantly that as much as we define individuality, individual person and his experience, it is also the collective coming together and socializing and bringing together in a certain sense to build a strong community and a strong nation and a strong center, a state. So, that is where this events and everyday life together actually shape our cities and experience, and that is where the events becomes important as much as the everyday life. So, this is again showing how people of all walks of life, the rural people, the urban people converge on this important landscape, the space, which is what I showed you the image. This is the very space in which that particular activity happened. You can see how contrasting these experiential qualities this space offers, that on one hand it is a very quiet, serene space where alone you can sit and perform your rituals and meditations, as well as engage into that large scale activity which brings a huge volume of people, the whole community which follows that particular tradition and ritual, it converges, and it is this holy bath ritual of purification which is something very important phenomenon of this particular part of the world. The civilization which we belong actually emerge defining these particular concepts and beliefs. That is where this event emerges as a strong a sense of collective identity of that particular community. So, it is an important aspect of existence that events play a role in shaping those concepts of existence, that we need to build this logic of existence also and experience in making the cities and spaces. So, you can see how people come down for this holy bath, which is an event happens every 12 years, is the Kumbh Mela, and it happens at different places in a cyclic sense, and this is Ujjain, which is the center of the city of country, which organizes, and now in 2016 the Kumbh Mela will be happening to exercise and experience that particular activity of the ritual of celebration of this religious performance. It also becomes a space for performing other activities which actually happen annually, and this is the Mahakal ki Savari, and Ujjain is actually the center of the main Shiva temple, and Shiva here in this city is the king of the city, and he is the ruler of the city. Even in this today's context of democratic government and setup, today also annually, when on this day, this week of that annual year, the god is brought out through a procession on the elephant, is taken to the river, and the rituals are performed with the support of the government officials, the policemen, and the whole city comes to watch and experience. So, the events of the city are important aspects of this existence, that city is not just everyday life, it is also the events, and these spaces actually perform that role and provide that performance space for that experience. So, the annual religious festival at the river in Ujjain actually plays important role in this particular experience of this urban life. Also, what I was referring to is a phenomenon of events. This is also another important event, which is also the same Kumbh Mela event, which constructs this whole idea of temporary urban space. A complete city is actually constructed for those 55 days, which is the holy month of that particular cyclic situation which happens in this Indian context, and it is this particular phenomena which allows us to see how important is this urban process of constructing this temporary city, where this whole world of Hindu philosophy and Hindu beliefs converge to perform those rituals of sacred purification, is an important thing which I had looked at the place where in 2013 Kumbh Mela happened at Allahabad, is an important aspect of sacred city, and hence events are not only annual, not only weekly, but they also happen every 12 years. So, this interesting aspect of existence which is defined through these traditions, which is followed since ancient time, they have become part of the modern life, and hence the city of Allahabad, when it conducted this particular event, had to organize the daily life of that city population, which actually is 1.12 million, and the population which converged for 55 days was 100 million who visited for 55 days, and on 10th February it was alone 30 million people congregated at the river banks to perform the holy ritual, 3 times the population of the existing city. So, a city has to come up to perform that particular event in a certain way. So, it is important that as we construct the city, we need to construct this dual aspect of creating spaces and providing structures to provide spaces for this experience of existence. At the same time, I will go diametrically opposite to another realm of creation which is emerging in the modern life, where city is not able to construct and provide spaces for this kind of large congregation for recreation. On the other hand, which modern life demands, is what entertainment parks are happening outside the cities, because mobility has increased, the land values have created issues and has resulted into places being developed on a large scale as an entertainment park, because it becomes important for at many fronts, economically, politically, socially, culturally, to create these realms, and it is an important aspect which is emerging in the recent modernization and urbanization in this country as we move further to discuss the idea of events. So, are these ideas of events which are there in the cities. In Ahmedabad, there is an event called International Kite Festival, emerging from our traditions of a festival called Uttarayan, which emerges from a religious belief and practices, and it is moved into the modern life to create this grand display of activity of kite flying and kite matching and kite fights, which have become a tradition by itself, and it is an important thing which has moved up to create an international festival of itself, because Ahmedabad is becoming an important, or Gujarat has been becoming an important of kite flying activity as a question, and hence it emerges that I need to create space for this kind of an international festival. On one hand, it is the tradition which moves into modernity of certain concept to take the event from one platform to another platform. It is also an exercise to show us that I need to create international activity and in the field of globalization. So, the tradition of certain activities and rituals and practices have moved into the realm of globalization, and hence the kite festival, which was actually a ritual of particular scale moves into international kite festival. So, as this activity, you can see there are innumerable activities actually emerging from our traditions and history, which have moved into modern life and traditions. Another festival in Mumbai city, what you can see in this image, on the sea front, the whole city converges to perform the ritual of immersing the Lord Ganesha into the sea on the last day of the festival, and it is an important activity because it takes out a procession of seeing off the Ganesha idol into the sea, and it is an important ritual which the whole city participate. All different scales of statues and idols from different neighborhoods, different precincts, different institutions move through the streets of the city and converge at the Chowpatty, and it becomes a grand spectacle of large scale activity as an event, and the whole city actually comes to standstill. All the economic activity, transportation closed down, and it is only one activity, which is the procession of this idol moving through the street, people dancing and singing to see off the god who will come next year again to their spaces and neighborhoods to celebrate that particular event. So, this is an important aspect of events which shape and bring people together, the faith, the beliefs, and the joy of celebrating and dancing in a certain way. Another festival, the Janmashtami festival, which happens in our Indian context, is another ritual and practice from the traditions, is to do these particular display of activity of breaking the pot which is hanged on the top on the height in the neighborhood streets or the city streets, and it is actually the celebration of the particular god and deity which is being celebrated as the Janmashtami festival. So, all our important traditions and festivals were actually structured to create these events where everybody came together to celebrate and dance, and that is the important aspect of these events, that as much as we created spaces and structures for everyday life and activity, it is also an important occasion to come together and do things together and build an important community and social life, and that is where these events play an important role and tradition. So is the festival of lights, which also emerges from our traditions and the mythology of Ramayana, and that to celebrate coming back of the Lord Rama and celebrate it with light and gaiety is what something today modern life also in cities we do and celebrate this thing. And you can see in these images how different institutions, places, neighborhoods actually lit up the whole place, urban space, streets, buildings, and even commercial buildings which are trying to sell goods. And it is an activity, an event where every family actually goes out to buy new things, new clothes, and celebrate those days of festivals with new clothes, sweets, distribution of sweets, meeting each other, and it is an important festival. So is another festival of colors, which is the Holi, which also brings joy and relief. So all festivals are basically colorful activities, colorful celebration of events and activity, coming together, interaction, sharing the joys in a certain sense, and that is what the important aspect of these events are, that they become moments in life which happen all around the year at different periods as per the calendar. You can see in this image how people are engaged in sharing, celebrating that activity of coloring each other, and hence celebrating the joy of sharing and interacting with each other as an aspect. This is not an Indian phenomena, it is a world phenomena where cities has built spaces for these events. So, this you can see in this important example, which is the Siena city in Italy, where everyday life and events occur in this particular space. A large scale city level space actually is designed, which called Piazza del Campo, as a place where horse races, community gathering, city gathering, and everyday life come together. So, spaces were designed and constructed in the city in those times, in the medieval cities, to define the idea of events as an aspect of experience of life, and hence the city becomes a good city, a social question. So is an example in Indian context where this question is taken up, and the colonial period you can see the idea when the capital city was designed and constructed, the New Delhi. Colonial Connaught Place was actually thought as a place of event, and it is scaled as per that, and everyday life also happens in a certain sense as a shaded colonnaded space, and there is a central space to perform many of the events which would happen round the year. So, both modern life and traditional aspects of Indian history actually come together to celebrate in this particular space. So, cities have worked to develop this idea of concepts of events and spaces to shape these events in a certain way. So, is sector 17, the modern city which Corbusier designed and planned and executed in India, the Chandigarh. Sector 17 was also designed to develop and define a pedestrian space, a strong powerful pedestrian space where everyday life can happen as well as events could be organized at a particular scale, where cities people could congregate either for a music concert or a festival celebration in a certain sense. So, that is where events shape some of the important spaces in the city. So, is in Ahmedabad case another example. Right from the early times when the city was constructed, this particular place, the Kankaria lake, was actually constructed during the times of the kings, and even in modern context today it has carried forward that idea of event to become an important public place to organize city level events, and during several times of the festivals this space actually transforms into a cultural landscape of events and festival activities. So, that is where I think events play an important role in the life of the city, in the life of the people, the experiences, what they need to enjoy and live for a good life. It becomes an important question, and hence it becomes important to understand that events are also happening at the everyday level also, which you can see in this particular image we discussed earlier in earlier session, that the food court, the night life of a city also becomes an important event of a everyday structure. So, events actually happen at many levels, many scales and many parts of the city, and probably some of the spaces simultaneously become experiences for both everyday life and the events in their existence in a certain sense. So, that is where I think we need to understand the relevance of events, of the events in the life as an experience and events as a place, as a space in the city structure and form. Tourism on the other hand also brings this question of events, where you can see this public square in Darjeeling space becomes a place where everybody comes and sits and spends time. There are cultural activities happening, social events happen. So, tourism also brings this whole dimension of another idea of structuring events, because one wants to display some of the things what the city is known for. City is known for cultural aspects, social aspects, festivals, colors, markets, etc. So, that is where the relevance of event becomes important. To move on further, I would like to now go to introduce one of the aspects of understanding experience. I think we looked at drawings, maps, photographs, and it is important to look at and study the real experience, the way it engages and happens and unfolds. The documentary film video is a medium which allows us to understand the story of experience in a city, and I think we will need to look at is one of the aspect of studying behavior and activities of a certain space. This is a short documentary I would like to show you, that it will allow us to understand that how life happens and unfolds, and that logic I need to understand as an aspect, as a question. Yes. Okay, let us look at this documentary which is trying to allow us to understand this relevance of video medium. It is a short documentary on called Junction Express, and it will allow us to understand how a junction can create activities and behaviors. Life starts early morning and uses spaces right from early morning times to late night hours. There are people who want to work from early hours, and there are people who want to serve you while you work from that particular time. To begin a good day, you need to have a good tea and probably a good bite to energize you to begin your day for good work. There are people who bring milk early morning so that your day begins right on time. The rituals, sacred activities, then the life begins and starts the day. Early morning school time, children have to be taken to school. The adults who follow a different structure of behavior and movements use the public transport system. The expressions of the people, the feelings of the people, it's an important thing to be understood. All age groups form this important urban activity. It's also a space for the poor people. And many people are looking for directions. It becomes the time for lunch hours. Time to sleep. siesta. Place for livelihood for some. Time to go back home after day's work, buy certain things on the way. Time to take a break, have a cup of tea. Coming back home from school, it's always a joy to come back home from school. So the day ends with a lot of activities the way they unfolded, and it continues even after sunset. So, one space constructs and creates so much as an experience, as activities or events. So, I think it is important to understand through this also that every day is a part of a story of smaller events and bigger events, and it is also a story of experiences which shape our cities. So, experience becomes an important aspect to be discussed as we plan our cities and define and create spaces. Experiences also creates interesting aspects of social engagement, community building, individual experience and privacies, and different aspects and diversities. It brings history, tradition and modernity together, and I think it is important to understand all different aspects of experience to shape our cities as a good city. Thank you.